Still
Blue,
working
before
on
we
Baskin Robbins.
before Jason gets into asking if you're recruited guys or anything else, is it possible that both parties, because Davante has been a big storyline, he's going to end up leaving New York now that Rodgers isn't going back and the cap number. Is it possible both the Packers and Davante lost in that trade? Neither side won?
Um, it kind of seems like it, doesn't it? I mean, if you look at it, kind of, hindsight now, like how it all played out in the end. And I look at it from Tay's side. He goes to Vegas to play, with Carr, right, his buddy, and really after a season, Carr's gone, right, and for him, he kind of goes back to Vegas and play with his buddy, and Carr's gone. And the team struggles tremendously, and then he gets, kind of makes his way to New York to play with Aaron for half a season, then half a season. Aaron's done in New York, and now he's kind of back in this limbo again, and with Green Bay, with how it, I'm sure there were contingencies tied to the picks, right? I don't know how exactly it worked out, but there might have been. I don't know all the details of the trade, but for Tay personally, like it just kind of, from one place to the other, and personally for him, it just didn't work out, and I feel bad for him because they obviously heck of a talent. Even though he made the most out of it in Vegas. I mean, the guy still put up numbers even with whoever was throwing the ball to him at the time. Still went out and made plays and did what he could. But going from one coast to the other and having it kind of play out the way it did just was unfortunate.
And what
Again,
about from the Packers standpoint? Because the Packers, I think, I was, and this is, I'm a �12𝘀 stan. I think �12𝘀 is a great general manager. And I know there's plenty, Ned and some of the other Twitter folks disagree. Look at you. Look at you promoting coffee, too. Yeah, look at you, Blue. You're starting to get it. Look at you.
Oh yeah, I had to get a coffee this morning, man. It's been an early morning week this week. So got a cup of
You got
coffee.
those donkeys.
I hear they're
Oranges
opening a
and
quick
donkeys.
trip down there.
Yeah,
They should.
Uh,
They should.
So, Blue, what about from the Packers standpoint? Because I have thought they got a player that was going to be 30. They traded, got a first and a second. Didn't pay him, and then all of a sudden last year you get that receiving core. Everybody's excited about Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. And now you look at it and you're thinking, we need a number one wideout. Hey, guy we had left the building, and now he's 3 years older, but we want it back. I guess, did I overinflate that �12𝘀 won that trade in a big way? Because now even I look at it and say, definitely, if anybody won, I don't think anybody won, because you lost a year of Rodgers and Davante that you missed the playoffs, and you didn't have a guy that was playing at still a really high level that could have helped these young guys grow and maybe have more growth quicker than what we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I guess there's a couple ways to attack that, right? Like, who were the first and second round picks that you took with Davante's selections?
So the Packers selected, and by the way, Tauscher right now on this is the living, breathing version of that GIF of Alonzo Mourning on the Heat bench, where he's got that face where he's like this,
Yeah.
and then it dawns on him, well, wait a minute. That's what's happening right now with him on this trade. 22nd pick, 53rd pick. First round pick, 22nd pick, Quay Walker. Packers' own pick that year, obviously Davante Wyatt. Then they package the Raiders' second round pick, which was 53, and their own, which was 59, to go up to 34 to take Christian Watson.
Okay. All right. So you kind of look at how that's panned out, and that just what they've done with those picks that they got from Tay in general, right? I think we look at Quay, his first few years, and it was questionable. I think last year he started to perform better. The injury, obviously, at the end of the year kind of derailed a lot of the progress that he had. So we'll see how he does this year and if they give him that fifth year, right? Like, I think that's the biggest question mark that we have for him. And obviously Watson, I think he's got a ton of talent. I really do. I really like what he brings. I think his size, his athleticism, like what he does is really beneficial to the offense. Just the knee injury that he suffered late in the year. I mean, Tausch, you've gone through it. I've gone through multiple of them. I just don't know. I know he can recover from it. That's not my question. The question is, when's he going to be able to come back, and how effective will he be coming back that late in the year and getting into things and being able to kind of integrate back into the team that late in the year, and where's the team going to be, right? So, that's my question when you look at these picks and kind of where Watson has been his first few years. And now here we are kind of at the money year, right? This is it for him. This is the money year for him. And you look at the entirety of the contract. So did the Packers lose the trade or did they walk away losers? Because you did lose Tay when he was still performing at a super high level. And would he have been a help to Jordan Love? Yeah. I think so. There's no denying that. I don't think you could sit here and say he wouldn't have helped Davante. Wouldn't have helped Jordan Love. He certainly would have. Yeah, he would have. To have a guy like that plus the young receivers, I think you would have taken that all the time. I think �12�cou👉 just looked at it from obviously the draft pick standpoint, the age standpoint, and the financial standpoint. He put it all together, and he went with with what he did, and you look at it hindsight now, and maybe it doesn't look as good, so to speak. But again, I still look at it from, I think Watson's a really good player. It's just unfortunate we haven't seen his true potential because of some unfortunate injuries. And now this knee injury, we'll see how he bounces back from it. And with 𝙒𝘗, I've said it, and I even said it during the year. The guy has all the physical abilities. He has everything you look for in a middle linebacker, but it just doesn't show itself all the time. And that's I just want to see the consistency. And if you see the consistency this full year, then maybe this thing looks like, hey, this panned out really well then, right? And if Watson heals up good, and he comes back later in the year and he does put together a decent season and Green Bay's able to hold on to him. And I get it. And that's the way I'm looking at it too. I can't sugarcoat it and say, there's no other way to look at it. But when it happened, it's hard to wave goodbye to a receiver that's really, really good and still super productive. It wasn't like the guy was 34, couldn't run, wasn't demanding double teams anymore. That's the way I looked at it at the time. But I don't get paid to be a GM, and except first and second round picks and things like that. So I understand it from both sides, but we'll see if he comes back. We'll see. It'll be interesting.
My issue, Brian, is that if they extend him because they had the opportunity, they disagreed. There was the DeAndre Hopkins contract that complicated matters because that was viewed as an outlier what Arizona had done with his contract. But if you get a deal done with Davante Adams going into the 21 season, during which, by the way, he caught 123 passes, franchise record, for 1,556 yards, franchise record, while not having the security of a long-term deal, and he is then on your team in 22, I think you probably make the playoffs. I still think you make the playoffs in 22 if Rodgers doesn't break his thumb in London. You're not. I don't think you win the Super Bowl, but with Davante Adams, I don't know. I don't know what happens. But what my biggest issue is that having him still on the team doesn't preclude you from drafting Tay Wicks in the 5th round in 2023, or even Jayden Reed in the 2nd round in 2023, because we know what Ted did with wide receivers. We know that he drafted guys even when he had a bunch of guys and still used 2nd round picks to do it, and that is �12�cou👉's biggest mentor. So maybe you still have Jayden Reed on your team, and now with the benefit of being around Davante Adams, he is more ready to be a number one a year from now, or maybe even this year, and there's that transition that occurs, and you still have Davante on your team. Now, I grant you, I'm getting this from the YouTube roundtable, I always want to keep my guys. right? You knew that they weren't going to bring you back. You got the Tom Mulhern Award your last year here because we all knew they weren't going to bring you back, even though we all wanted you back, right? I mean, that's the truth. And I am more guilty more often than not of, and I've said this a million times on this show, if I was the GM, our team would be old and we'd have a bunch of injuries and we'd go 4-13 because all the guys that I like were still good players if they were healthy, but age is undefeated. So I understand that my bias factors in here. But Davante is different, and that's the point you just made so well. He was 29, and the general manager said that they did analytic studies on guys that are Hall of Fame caliber and said they were still productive into their 30s. He was calling Davante Adams a Hall of Fame caliber player and then traded him anyway. And to me, that is why, at best, this will turn out to have been a push trade. I don't think, and if that means they both lost to a degree, which I think Tauscher's come around to, I would agree with him. Especially if Quay Walker doesn't get significantly better.
Correct. I mean, and that's, and that, what you said about, well, I think people would say, well, then you don't, like you kind of mentioned, well, then you don't draft the wide receivers that we did and all that. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't have drafted those guys. It certainly doesn't mean it, because you mentioned it. They brought in Tay and they brought in Jordy and they brought in Cobb when they had, stacked rooms as it was. So, like, they certainly didn't mind bringing in super talented wide receivers with rooms that were already very talented, right? Like, there was something about Green Bay and always refreshing the ranks and bringing in talented receivers year after year to keep that room super competitive, super hungry, and just very balanced. And that's what they did. So, like, there's no saying that just because they kept Tay wouldn't mean they wouldn't continue to draft and bring in young, good receivers. They would. Because, listen, I mean, there's a reason why Jordy, I'm not saying Jordy was who he was because who he learned from, but he certainly learned things from guys that were older than him. Cobby the same way. Tay the same way. They learned things and picked things up from the guys that were in front of them, and they learned what they learned, picking it up from Aaron, what Aaron liked to do with those receivers. They pick that up and then they do it their way. And all these things kind of, they fit together. And that's what these guys, the younger guys, would have learned from Tay and Aaron and all those guys. But, again, that's me playing Captain Hindsight, I guess. But it is what it is, right? It is what it is.
Well, like you said, I think there's value in that. You certainly learned from the guy in front of you, and Mark Tauscher too, in addition to Chad Clifton. All right.